האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov and good evening, everyone. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parshas Bo, this section Yud Zayin. Okay, in section Yud Zayin, the Zera Shimshon is going to focus on a point that has to do with the Korban Pesach. Of course, in this Parsha, as we just said, the Korban Pesach in Mitzrayim is discussed. And so in this next piece, the Zera Shimshon discusses something that relates somewhat indirectly to the way it's talked about in the Parsha, but it certainly relates to the idea of the Korban Pesach and an event that took place that we can also learn something significant from. Psachim Perek Dalet. If we look in Maseches Psachim in the fourth Perek, we find the following story. Todos Ish Romi. Todos was a Roman man. He was actually a Jewish Roman man. He was a leader of the Jewish community in Rome. Hanhiges b'nei Romi lechol gediyim mikulasim b'leilei Pesach. So Todos used to accustom people. He used to kind of spread the word for the Jewish community in Rome to eat gediyim mikulasim, roasted sheep in the way that they were prepared, that the Korban Pesach would be prepared, and he would have them do that and tell them to do that B'leilei Pesach, on the night of Pesach. So the Gemara doesn't explain his reasoning, but apparently his reasoning was that here this Jewish community in Rome was so cut off from everything happening in Eretz Yisrael, and of course everything happening, all of the mitzvahs that they could do in Eretz Yisrael that they couldn't do outside. He didn't want the people to forget the incredibly important mitzvah of Korban Pesach. So they did something that was similar. They knew they couldn't bring the actual Korban Pesach, of course, but they did something similar by roasting the sheep and eating the sheep that night. And so that kept alive the concept of the Korban Pesach for them. However, this was problematic. As the Gemara continues, Sholchu lo, so the Chachamim in Eretz Yisrael sent him a message. Il mole todos ata, if you were not Todos, Gozruni alecha nidoi, we would have decreed on you nidoi. Nidoi is excommunication, like cherem. We would have decreed that on you, which is a very serious penalty. A person is completely cut off from the Jewish community. No one can do business with the person. No one can communicate with the person. So we would have decreed a very serious consequence on you if you were not who you are. Sha'ata korov lahachil es Yisrael kodshim bachutz, because you were seeming to do, you came close to a major avera of eating kodshim outside of its appropriate location. Obviously, Rome is extremely far from Yerushalayim and the place where the Korban Pesach is supposed to be eaten, and you've made it appear that people can eat the Korban Pesach in Rome. So you've done something very wrong, and we were considering putting you in cherem if it's not for who you were, v'chule, etc. So a little bit later, the Gemara says, "Umay chashivuse de todos." What was the special importance of todos, where they said, because of who you are, we didn't put you in cherem? What was his special importance? Rabbi Yossi bar Avin Omar, Rabbi Yossi bar Avin said, "Matil mili lekis shel talmidei chachamim have." That Todos was a person who used to take the profits from his business, from his merchandise, from his sale of merchandise, and put it in the pockets of the Talmidei Chachamim. So what was his chashivas? That he was a major supporter of the Talmidei Chachamim, of poor Talmidei Chachamim, and he would help them, and so he gained a reputation as being a very generous person because of that. And that's why they said, you're a great man, you support the Talmidei Chachamim, so we're not going to put you in cherem. Ad kan Lashono, until here is the Gemara in language of the Gemara and Pesach. So next paragraph, Makshim Ha'olam. So the world asks, that means, the Zera Shimshon says, that means everybody, all of the Meforshim ask the Bam Kasha, the big Kasha here in this story. V'chichas v'sholom hechnifu lo rabbanon. Is, God forbid, are the rabbis saying that they wanted to flatter this man, that they gave him special treatment, because he paid money to the Talmidei Chachamim? Of this, God forbid, there was like a corruption here somehow, that because he paid money to the Talmidei Chachamim, they therefore kind of looked the other way and they let him do something that really was a terrible action, forbidden, and they didn't put him in Cherem. It looks very corrupt. It looks very sinister. It looks bad. Is that what the Gemara is saying? V'od ma inyan zeh lazeh. And also, what's the connection between the two things? We have a story of what Todos did with these animals and roasting these animals and telling people to building up that kind of practice. And then we have the fact that he was being told by the Chachamim that they should have put him in Cherem, but they say no, because you're so chashuv about giving the money and supporting Talmidei Chachamim, you're not going to be put in Cherem. What's the connection? It seems arbitrary. What's the specific connection between these things? So the Zera Shimshon is going to explain. V'yesh lomar, and we can say to the Perek Vav Mehochos Talmud Torah in the 6th parak of the Rambam's laws of Talmud Torah, Mona HaRambam Esrim V'Harba Devarim. The Rambam counts and lists 24 things shemenadin es ha'adam, for which we put a person into nidoy, into excommunication, into cherem. The Rambam actually gives a list of 24 things that a person could do for which he would be put into nidoy, into cherem. Ubichlalam, and included in that list, hamezalzel bedavar echad midivrei sofrim, is someone who denigrates, who mocks one thing, even just one thing that is midivrei sofrim, that comes from the chachamim, that's a law or an enactment that comes from the rabbis. If a person makes fun of, mocks, denigrates one thing, midivrei sofrim, then they're already subject to the consequence of nidoy of cherem. The Hiksha Shama Kesef Mishnah, and over there on that Rambam, the Kesef Mishnah asks B'Shem Haran, in the name of the Ran. The B'Mixas Duchte Amrina, and in several places in Shas we say Demand over ad Rabbanon lucky, that a person who violates a law of the Rabbanon gets malchus, he gets lashes. We call that makas mardus. There's a special name for it because it's not the malchus that a person would get for violating a Torah, a lo saseh, but rather it's makas mardus, it's for violating a law of the Rabbanon, of the rabbis. Mashma, this implies the fact that a person who violates a law of the rabbis gets these lashes implies aval shamute lo mashmatina le, that we don't put him in cherem. So the Kesef Mishnah says, how can the Rambam say that if you mock and denigrate a law of the rabbis, you get put into cherem, when in the Gemara we see that if you violate a law of the rabbis, you get makas mardas, you don't get cherem, you don't get that penalty. The penalty, the consequence you get is the lashes, rabbinic lashes. So V'tirate, so the Kesef Mishnah answers, V'tirate hu Zichrono Livracha, and the Kesef Mishnah Zichrono Livracha answers, the mepatpek o hamizalzel b'dover echad midivrei sofrim, someone who casts doubt, casts aspersion, and makes fun of one of the laws of the rabbis, chomir tfei, this is worse, this is more serious, may over al dovar midivreihem, from someone who violates one of the rabbinic laws. Ulefikach, and therefore, afal pisha ha'over eino chayev ela makas mardus, even though it's true, as we see, as the Kesef Mishnah said in several Gemaras, many times in Shas, that a person who violates a rabbinic law gets these lashes, a person who casts doubt, casts aspersions, criticizes, makes fun of the law of the rabbis is obligated to get nidoy, is obligated to be excommunicated, which the Kesef Mishnah is making clear is a worse punishment than the makas mardus, than the rabbinic lashes. Ad kan lashono, until here is the language of the Kesef Mishnah. And if we pause for a moment and think about it, we can understand exactly what the Kesef Mishnah is saying, because the idea that someone might violate a law could happen to anyone. That's the nature of the Torah. The Torah tells us there's no such thing as a human being who never commits a sin. That's the nature of law, is that we're not perfect, and people who might always violate a law. So that, so to speak, is within the realm of the normal, of the acceptable, that sometimes we violate a law and the Torah has consequences for those violations. So that's what happens if a person violates a Torah law, violates one Torah law, they get makas mardas. But a person who mizalzel, a person is making fun of a law of the Chachamim and denigrating it and criticizing it, that's even worse. That's not considered within the realm of a normal activity of a believing and of an observant Jew. So that's why his penalty is a nidoy, is cherem, which the Kesef Mishnah says is worse than makas mardas. So continuing, umeato yuvan hai uvda de todos. And from now that we understand this, we can understand the incident with Todos in Rome. The yuvan nami haloshan, and we can also understand the unusual language that the Gemara used, shel gozruni alecha nidoy. We would have decreed on you excommunication. Shahaya lo lomar, because we would have expected the Gemara to say, anu hayinu minadinoscha. We would have excommunicated you, right? Think about those two phrases. It's much more straightforward and simple to say for the rabbis to have said and sent a message to Todos saying, anu hayinu minadinoscha. We would have put you in chayra. However, they didn't say that. They said, hayinu gozrunu alecha nidoy. We would have made a gezerah of nidoy on you. Why this lesson of gezerah? We would have made a decree against you of excommunication. So he's going to explain. Because they use that special different language, unexpected language of we would have decreed excommunication on you. Mashman implies that what the rabbis were saying to Todos was they were contemplating making a new rule, a new gezerah, that someone who does what he did, what Todos did, would deserve to be put into excommunication, but not based on the previous understanding of the laws, but based on a new rule, a new gezerah that they were contemplating making. V'hainu, and this is because, v'hainu mishum, this is because the lefi ha'emes, according to the truth, Todos lo hayanikra mizalzel al divrei chachamim. What Todos did was not technically a violation of making fun of or mocking the laws of the rabbis, of the Chachamim. Lefi shelo haya osa derech zilzul. Todos did not do anything in a mocking or way of being critical or anything like that. Ela haya over al divrei Chachamim. What he did do was he violated a law of the Chachamim. She'asru lechol gedim kulas b'leilei psachim. The Chachamim had forbade eating a roasted lamb on Leil Pesach. In other words, if you can fulfill Korban Pesach correctly and you're in a position and circumstances to do that, wonderful. But if you're not, the Chachamim said don't roast a lamb if you're not. If you can't do it according to the rules, you're not in a location geographically, or you're not, whatever the reason may be, you're tamei maybe, whatever the situation may be, don't roast the lamb on Pesach night and eat it unless you're doing it as the Korban Pesach. That's a rule, a law that the Chachamim had made, and Todos certainly violated that by doing it in Rome and roasting these sheep. Mishum hachi, therefore lo haya bar nidoy. Therefore, technically, he was not someone who should have been put into excommunication and received the chayra. Ella lefi shahan higasa rabim lasos kach. But since he not only did it himself, but he was teaching other people to do it, he was getting groups of people to do it, yesh lanu lomar, then the rabbi said, then we could say, shehu kimo misha oseh kedei lezalzel b'divrei chachamim. That is beginning to appear like someone who is doing it to make fun of the laws of the chachamim, the words of the chachamim. Not that that was his intention. They knew that wasn't his intention. But they said, once you start getting a whole bunch of people to do it, then you're starting to look like someone who's trying to teach disrespect of the Chacham. The ode, and more so, shahazilzul ba me'atzma. The denigration of the rabbi's rules comes up by itself, even though Todos didn't intend it. Kisherabim ovrim al divrei chachamim. In any situation when a group of people violate the divrei chachamim, then that in and of itself is enough to cause a disrespect and a denigration of the words of the rabbis, even if truly the person who arranged it, Todos in this case, that was the farthest thing from his mind, and that was not his intention. He, as we talked about before, had a positive intention, even though he was doing something that was us. Omnam lefi, however, lefi shetodas hayamatil mili. Now the Zera Shimshon is going to go back to what made him special. However, since Todos used to give from his profits, from his business to the Chachamim, ein lanu lomar shemizalzel b'divreihem, then we shouldn't say that he is trying to make fun of the Chachamim. Shahare Adarabba, because we see just the opposite. Anu roim shachachamim chashuvim heim be'einav. We see by his actions that the chachamim were very important to Todos. He respected them. He wanted to support them. The lachein sholchulo, and that's why they sent the message that they sent. Il mole Todos ata. If you were not Todos, if you were not a person who clearly showed that you would never want to make fun of the chachamim, rather you respected the chachamim and you support the chachamim, Hayinu gozrim nidoy. Then we would have made a new gezerah of nidoy against you. Sha'afo pisha ein kavanoscha lezalzel. Even though your intention was not to denigrate them, mikol makom. Nevertheless, nira kamo zilzul. It looks like someone who's trying to do something to make fun of the chachamim. However, since in your particular case, everyone knows that you treat the rabbis with such respect, and God forbid you would never consciously or actively, intentionally make fun of their words, mishum hachi, because of this, lo gazruni alecha nidoy. Lo gazrunu alecha nidoy, we did not actually declare an excommunication against you. Aval mikol makom, but nevertheless, anu lomdim mikan, we learn from here, we learn from this incident with Todus, if another person would do this, then that person would in fact be chayiv to receive excommunication. And that this action is included in the 24 things in the Rambam's list that a person can be excommunicated for. So just to go back and recap, and then also to take a very important lesson, I think, from this piece in the Zera Shimshon, it bothered the Meforshim, like the Zera Shimshon said, it bothers everybody who reads the story to think, God forbid, is there something sinister and corrupt going on here, that the Chachamim didn't follow through on the correct halacha because a man kind of paid them off? Is that chas v'shalom what the Gemara is saying? So the Zera Shimshon says, no, once you understand the language exactly and precisely that was used, and you understand exactly what the Chachamim meant, you see it's far from that. What the Chachamim were saying is, Todus, you're doing actions, you did actions that make it look like you're being mezalzel, you're making fun of the laws of the rabbis. However, you, because of your actions in supporting Chachamim and giving them money and taking from your own profits from your business to help the Talmidei Chachamim make it and to support the poor Talmidei Chachamim, that's what proves, that's what saved you. That's what proves that you would never be mezalzel in their words, and that certainly was the farthest thing from your mind. And so, and it's reason, it's for that reason that we didn't put, that the Chachamim didn't put Todus into Chayrim. So it's very relevant. The connection becomes very clear between the reason giving for why he wasn't put into Chayrim and the actual situation itself in terms of what he did. For our purposes, there's certainly a wonderful takeaway here, which is that we never know what an act of chesed, what an act of tzedakah can do for us. Of course, we know it's an incredible, important mitzvah to do chesed, to do acts of gemilas chasadim, and specifically for people who are Talmidei Chachamim, and we support them and we help them. It's an incredible mitzvah in its own sake and in its own right. However, what we're seeing from here is that it can also have unintended benefits, tremendous benefits. Todus was spared from being put into Cherem, which could have ruined his life until he was able to, to hopefully have that removed, all because of the fact that he had this reputation as an incredibly generous man and a person who went to extraordinary lengths to help Talmidei Chachamim and support them, and that saved him in his difficult situation, which is a good lesson for us.